clinicians, from chaplains and psychotherapists, what have you. This means that everything involving the human persona is something to learn from, something to benefit from, and also to teach others and to benefit others. Not just in terms of how Allah describes the universe, but how Allah describes the universe internally, the individual universe of the human being. So there's three dimensions of the human being. The first is an-nafs al-mutma'inna, which is the spiritual dimension of the human being, pertaining to any and all things that connect us to Allah, which define and clarify and expound upon our connection, our relationship with Allah. The second dimension is an-nafs al-lawwama, and this represents anything pertaining to psychosis, psychology, psycho-emotionalism, any and all psycho-emotional elements which connect our mind and our heart together, and also things which causes our minds and our hearts to function separately. The third dimension is an-nafs al-ammara, which pertains to any and all things which connects us directly to ad-dunya, the mundane, pertaining to desire for companionship, desire for sexuality, desire for food, rest, what have you. So we're going to be focusing on, relative to mental health, we're going to exclusively be focusing on all the dimensions of the human being. Now, Allah tells us in the Quran, Allah says, consult the people of vigor when you don't know. So in this context, the people of vigor are people like myself, pertaining to people who are clinicians, psycho-emotional professionals, because Allah has allowed us to receive education and skills pertaining to the subject of mental health. So what is mental health, right? Mental health is pertaining to anything which causes stability of the mind and the heart to go awry. So that can literally be anything. That could be the loss of a job, loss of a loved one, a broken toe, or any type of injury or any type of happening in your life which can cause your mind or heart to shift in a particular direction, which causes pathological character or pathological behavior. This is mental illness. Mental illness not meaning that you're delusional, but in terms of you've been psycho-emotionally compromised. So psycho-emotional trauma is a direct manifestation of mental toxicity, if that makes sense. So mental illness doesn't necessarily mean that a person needs to be institutionalized, or as our brother Shadeed mentioned, it doesn't mean that a person has to have a ruqya, exorcism, or jinn extraction imposed upon them. One of the problems, one of the pitfalls that Muslims have, we have this pathological notion, and we pontificate and promote this pathological narrative that a tajneen, jinn influence or jinn possession, is exactly the same as mental toxicity or mental health, when they are respectively different. Now, what is true and what is honest is that there are characteristics, qualities, descriptions of a tajneen and mental illness that are 100% parallel. But in spite of those qualities being 100% parallel, that in no way means that they're exactly the same. Because what ends up happening in our communities is that unfortunately people get both religio-spiritually misdiagnosed as well as, for example, you have certain people who are religio-spiritually misdiagnosed and even accused of being majnoon, jinn-influenced, jinn-possessed, where in fact they just have a legitimate psycho-emotional pathology or a psycho-emotional issue. When a person is religio-spiritually misdiagnosed, what ends up happening, obviously, is that their psycho-emotional trauma, respectively, is not dealt with, is not treated. When this happens, as time goes on, what could end up happening is that the lack of care, the lack of psycho-emotional care, can convert into a tajneen. It can convert into jinn influence, jinn possession. And the opposite is also true. If a person is clinically misdiagnosed, which is just as often the case as is religio-spiritually being misdiagnosed. If a person is clinically misdiagnosed as having a mental illness, where in fact they are majnoon, jinn influenced, jinn possessed, then the same thing happens in reverse, the 180. that clinical misdiagnosis of a person being mentally disturbed or psycho-emotionally bruised, if that is not dealt with, then that a tajneen, that jinn influence, that jinn possession that a person may have, but a person is misdiagnosed as being clinically ill, that can also convert into mental illness. So a tajneen and mental illness, they're respectively completely different things, but there's about 99% overlap in intersectionality between the two respectively. And even for professionals, even for religious, spiritual professionals and psycho-emotional professionals, it's very difficult for us to discern the difference. Even a person who is Araki, even a person who is an expert in Al-Ruqya, they don't always make the mark in terms of their religious or spiritual diagnosis, in terms of a person being Majnun. Sometimes or a lot of times they may get it wrong. And instead of a person being Majnun, jinn influence or jinn possessed, they can simply be legitimately psycho-emotionally disturbed. And then also, the opposite is also true. A person like me, I make my assessment on a person. That person may not necessarily be clinically disturbed. The person may very well be Majnun, jinn influenced, jinn possessed. Allah specifically mentions about the validity of the reality of a tajneen, however, just in the entirety of Surah An-Nas, the chapter of humanity, where Allah commands us to seek refuge with Him from Wasl al-Khannas, and then Allah describes what that is. Allah says, those from among jinn and men who whisper into the chest of men. So this is how a tajneen operates. This is how it works. The jinn from among humans and men, they whisper into the minds and the hearts of men. But that's just only one side of the coin. So in all reality, a tajneen and mental illness, they're two sides of the same coin. They both represent the manifestation of pathology, but we have to be very careful how we approach those respective pathologies. I'll give you an example. In terms of homosexuality, right? In the 70s, because of the success of the homosexual lobby, LGBTQ, they were successfully able to strike homosexuality from the DSM. The DSM, from a secular perspective, that's what they consider their like clinical Bible, if that makes sense. So the DSM has all of the list of all of the respective psycho-emotional pathologies which have been discovered among human beings from a behavioral scientific perspective. So they struck homosexuality from the DSM, but they still flawed because they did the right thing for the wrong reason. Because from an Islamic perspective, we know that homosexuality is not a psycho-emotional pathology, it's a spiritual pathology. Because any and all things that Allah has made mahrum, Islamically prohibited, they're manifestations of diseases of the heart. So a sin is not a manifestation of psycho-emotional pathology. A sin, doing something that Allah has declared mahrum, Islamically prohibited, that is rebellion. That is fusuq. That is rebellion against the commands of Allah. So rebelling against the commands of Allah, there's no way that you're mentally ill because it's something that you're consciously doing. So you can't actively be doing a sin and you're out of your mind. That's not reality. So if you're consciously committing a sin, obviously there's no mental disturbance. You just on some I'm doing me type of thing. So, you know what I'm saying? With that being said, homosexuality was stricken from the DSM. They did the right thing for the wrong reason. They didn't do it because they recognized revelation describing sin being a disease of the heart. They did it because of pressure from a homosexual lobby. That's why they struck it from the record. So for us as Muslims, we have to operate very objectively, and we have to recognize the difference between sins, mental pathologies, spiritual pathologies. Our problem, as I mentioned earlier, is that we want to merge and mesh all. We want to mesh both together as though they're the same when they're not. So in my field, chaplaincy, when I visit people, when I counsel people, I have to be very careful that there's always a 50-50 probability that a person that I'm dealing with is either legitimately Majnun or just legitimately psycho-emotionally bruised, or that they're both. Because it's very likely that a person can be both jinn-influenced or jinn-possessed and psycho-emotionally disturbed. But you have to leave those three options open at all times. Now, for us as Muslims in positions of al-imara or al-imama leadership, we're very limited. We're self-limited. because we don't want to admit that we don't know something. There's two definitions, there's two differences between the knowledgeable person and the ignorant person. One, a knowledgeable person is always willing to admit that they don't know everything. An ignorant person feels that they know everything. Two, a knowledgeable person is always willing to recognize and accept the reality that they can learn something from anyone, regardless of whether they're right or wrong. An ignorant person feels that they're the only one who can teach someone something. So when we approach our communities as Muslims, the A'imma or the Ulad or the Ulama, the Imams or the students or the Du'at, the propagators or the scholars, they refuse to recognize and accept their self-limitations, whether it be limitations in terms of academic competency or conveyance of information or knowledge. And because our ego and our desires are at play when we are called to the service of others, we miss the mark in very important ways because we end up doing a disservice to people as opposed to doing a service to people. But fortunately, these venues and venues like it, we need to keep the floor open and allow ourselves to be self-permeable, to allow ourselves to learn methods and learn new ways on how to convey healing to people. Now, my respective capacity as a chaplain, literally 90% of my profession has to deal with compassion, and we have to be empathetic and compassionate to all people at all times. And the proof of this is when Allah says in chapter 5, verse 8, Allah says, and never let your hatred against any people prevent you from behaving justly. So what that means is that even if you're in opposition with the person, our posture and position as Muslims is always to be in the service of others, even those we are in opposition with. Now, many times, I myself personally, I have been called to service to counsel people who I just can't stand, who just get under my skin. But I have to return to revelation. I have to return to Tanzil. I have to return to revelation via the Quran and the Sunnah, and I have to be self-humbled, and I have to remind myself that Allah has put me in a certain space and place to be of service to others. And for me to deny this person permeability, to deny that person to allow themselves to tell their story on what they think and how they feel, I'm doing a boom, an injustice to that person. So for chaplaincy, unlike psychiatry or psychology, I don't prescribe medication and I don't diagnose. My job, my maslahah, my purpose is to assess what I observe, what I see, and also try to assess what I don't see. So we have 3 types of observation for us as chaplains. What a person actually says, body language in terms of how they posture, and also what they're hiding. So a lot of times a person may say something, but they're really not saying something. And a person may say something, but yet they're saying something but a scream. Like oftentimes, a lot of times when a person is emotionally bruised, psycho-emotionally damaged, they tend to hide that behind humor. And humor is, you find in some of the most lauded and gifted comics and comedians were very dark on the inside. Classic example, Robin Williams. Robin Williams made everyone in the world laugh. He ended up committing suicide, right? So that shows you that just because you convey a certain imagery doesn't mean that that imagery is a part of you. You can be completely abstract from that. You can make the entire world laugh, but when you look into the mirror, all you do is shed tears. And we have a lot of psycho-emotionally wounded people in our communities who are methodically, deliberately marginalized. And they're put into this ugly category of just being non-religious or jinn influenced, jinn possessed. I'll share a story. The story is from the Muslim of Muslim and the book titled Kitab al-Iman, the chapter of faith. The narration is by Al-Tufail ibn Amr al-Dawsi, may Allah be pleased with him. Him and another person from the same tribe, Badr al-Dawsi, during the time of the second hijrah, in which the Muslims migrated from Al-Makkah to Yathrib, later known as Al-Madinah, they came to Muhammad, peace be upon him, and they asked him, let us assist you with arms and fortifications to protect you from the disbelievers, as we did in Jahiliyyah. Muhammad, he refused this type of assistance because the command of al-qital, of combat, of al-jihad, was not imposed upon the believers yet. So his main mission was to try to get as many people out of al-Mecca safely and unscathed as possible. So he had this conversation with Al-Tufail, and Al-Tufail said, okay, if you don't want us to get the strap, as they say, right? If you don't want us to squat up, at least let us help you extract people from al-Mecca and help them make hijrah, escape. So he said, fine, help us commit to the escape, to the hijrah. So he did. Him and his fellow tribesmen, who's unnamed in the narration, they assisted Muhammad, peace be upon him, in getting the companions, may Allah include them all together, out of al-Mecca to Yathrib. When the Muslims got to Yathrib, and after they established the Islamic State, the Khilafah, the community in al-Medina, this companion of Al-Tufail, he began to become ill because of the climate dynamics were significantly different for him in al-Mecca as opposed to al-Medina. He got sick. A shaitan came to him and he edged on his feelings of loneliness, isolation, because he became so ill that he was not able to be part of the community. He wasn't able to be a communal member because of his illness. So he developed some type of psycho-emotional trauma, right, that would be classified in today's times as maybe depression or sadness or what have you. So this companion of Al-Tufail, he experienced these things in real time. And because he experienced these things in real time, and it wasn't addressed because it may have not been known, or you know how people are, even back then, the pathologies of man thousands of years ago are the same pathologies of man that exist today. And even the companions, may Allah include them all together, they manifested many pathologies. And this is why Revelation was real for them, because it was a real treatment and cure for their pathologies. So because this person was not cared for, because this person was not empathized in a way that was proper for him personally, he sank deeper and deeper into his own darkness. And because his psycho-emotional bruising was not checked, because it wasn't remedied, a shaitan, Satan, was able to influence him to attempt suicide. So this person attempted suicide. He dies as a result of his suicide attempt. In the narration, it mentions that he severed his hands to the extent that he bled to death. After this person's death, he appeared to Al-Tufail in a dream. And Al-Tufail described this dream to Muhammad. He described him as having his hands bounded, as though his hands were recovering from burn wounds. So he asked him in the dream, how did your Lord deal with you? How did your Lord treat you? And the person said, Allah forgave me, but did not forgive my hands. He said that he forgave me because of my service for the Prophet, but he did not forgive my hands. Al-Tufail told this story to the Prophet, and Muhammad said he made a dua for this person. He said, may Allah even forgive his hands. There's monumental lessons from this narration. Number one, contrary to popular opinion or pathological opinion, suicide does not inherently take a person outside of Islam. That's the first lesson, right? Because we have in real time a companion, may Allah be pleased with him, in spite of his suicide attempt, and in spite of his death resulting from his suicide attempt, he was still mercified by Allah because it was known that he was Muslim. So the default in terms of a Muslim or a person who dies upon suicide or suicide attempt, the default principle is that if this person's Islam was ma'lum or known or mutawatir, common among the people, in spite of what they did which led to their death, they're still to be regarded as a Muslim. And their hisab is with Allah. So we don't worry about their hisab with Allah. We judge based upon what's apparent, right? And there's a lot of wisdom in which Allah says, Kayfa tahkumun? How do you judge? So we have to always be conscious of how we judge. Because we judge, because when you give judgment, hukm, judgment has to be predicated on al-basira, vision, right? So there's three types of al-basira, there's three types of vision: foresight, insight, hindsight. You have to have clarity pertaining to something before it happens. You have to have clarity in the moment of something happening. You have to have clarity after something happens. Very few people have even one, not even all three. But Allah always has all three at the same time. This is why Allah is al-basir, the ultimately visionary. Because Allah has all manifestation dimensions of al-basira in his divine arsenal. That's why Allah is al-basira. But Allah, out of His mercy, He sprinkles certain manifestations of al-basira to certain types of people. Like, for example, there's a very famous story by Abdullah ibn Abbas, may Allah be pleased with him, whom Muhammad asked Allah to give him understanding of the Quran and understanding of Islam. Two people came to him and asked him the same question. They asked him whether there's a tawbah for murder. The first person who came to him, he said, yes, there is repentance for murder. The second person who came to him, he said, there is no repentance for murder. So his entourage, his students, they came to him and they said, what's the deal with this? Why did you give two different answers for the same question? And what Ibn Abbas, may Allah please with him, mentioned was that there was no repentance for that person. Because he mentioned, I saw the thirst for killing in his face. So this was the type of insight, this was the type of basira that Allah sprinkled upon Ibn Abbas from His mercy. And a lot of people don't get that type of basira. A lot of people don't get that type of insight or foresight or hindsight. But Allah, out of His mercy, gives that to who He wills. So for us as chaplains or mental health professionals, we have to work really, really hard in the hopes that Allah sprinkles some of that basira, some of that vision, whether it be foresight, insight, hindsight, in our arsenal, our professional arsenal, even our personal arsenal. I find myself a lot of times completely blindsided when I counsel people. And then sometimes it's not until I walk away from the situation, I'm like, damn, like I should have handled the situation this way, but I handled it that way. And this is always, it's always learning. It's always an opportunity and a mandate to learn. By show of hands, by the way, how many people personally know either friends or loved ones who has suffered significantly from psycho-emotional trauma? Yeah, right. Everyone in the building, right? So, I mean, being as though we're African American, our experience gives us a lot of vision, a lot of insight into trauma. So, for many of us, we've experienced trauma from the cotton fields to the projects, if that makes sense. You know what I'm saying? So, and even those from amongst us, our family. Like, for example, myself, I was able to do some family research, and I found out that my family paternally, through my nasab, my paternal genealogy, that my ancestors were free people in the Americas before the American Revolution. But that does not mean that I don't suffer from the pathologies that anyone else suffers from. We still are one people, regardless of whether you have ancestry of slavery or not. We are all in this fight together. But the problem is that we conveniently detach ourselves from certain types of people because we think that we are elevated. We think that we are out of. You're not the chocolate with Quran out of. You're not elevated. You're at the same level as everyone else. And we have to recognize the fact that we're not at different levels. And these levels are only decided by Allah anyway. Just like Allah says in the Quran, only Allah knows who are the abrar. Only Allah knows who are the righteous amongst us. So one of the reasons why we're so apathetic, one of the reasons why we're so careless and incompassionate to people is that we think we're superior to them. And in fact, only Allah knows who's superior to the other. And more than likely, the very same people whom you feel you're superior to, those people are really above you. 9 times out of 10, the average person who you deem as being inferior to you, in all reality, you're inferior to that person. And the proof is that Muhammad, he said, arrogance is denying truth and disrespecting people. And we deny truth and disrespect people all the time. And may Allah protect us from this, and may Allah save us from our own destruction. As Allah says in chapter 2, verse 195, Allah says, and do not be led to destruction via your hands, and do not allow your actions to destroy you. We allow our actions to destroy us all the time, not just as individuals, but as community. And one of the ways that we allow our actions to destroy ourselves is because we don't commit ourselves to the service of others. We don't commit ourselves to the care of others. We're completely, pathologically, methodically distant from the condition of the other. And Allah has mercified me and honored me completely by allowing me to be in this space and place as a chaplain, because it forces me to be even more empathetic to the other. And it actually taught me how apathetic people really are. Like, I'll be honest with you, I was completely blindsided to how much apathy people hold in their minds and their hearts prior to chaplaincy. I see people on social media and through Instagram and all of these venues, and even personally, they joke about things that could never be funny. They joke about people getting stabbed and having their chest cut open. They'll laugh about it. Like, this is not funny. They'll laugh at it. People have literally joked about people committing suicide. Literally. And me personally, I've literally, by Allah's mercy, I've literally had to stop people personally from committing suicide. Someone I knew from college, I literally had to miss Jummah because this person told me, I'm going to pop pills until I drop dead. That's what they said word for word. And I literally had to physically restrain that person and prevent them from attempting suicide. And this is not the first time that I had to actually personally prevent a human being from attempting suicide. And in fact, most people who I know personally who've attempted suicide have been Muslims. And most people who I either know personally or who I've counseled, most people that I know who I've counseled who have attempted suicide, they've attempted suicide more than once. Now, statistically, most people who attempt suicide, they don't attempt it more than once. So for a person to attempt suicide more than once, you know that there's something very serious going on in their lives that is unchecked and that people don't care about. And then also, one thing that a lot of our communities don't want to speak about is that most people who actually attempt suicide, at one point in their life, they were victimized via sexual abuse. Literally almost every single person, whether they're Muslim or not, doesn't matter. Almost every single person who I either know and or have personally counseled who've attempted suicide, they were victims of sexual abuse at one point in their life. I know Muslim men, personally, who were raped in prison. I know Muslim men, personally, who were sexually molested by their own relatives, by their own family members. There's a sister I know, she was raped by an uncle of hers, and that's how she acquired HIV. So these are real stories. Like, I literally know people who've been through this, and I've counseled people who have been through this. I know people who've left their children with their family members, and their family members sexually abuse them. There was a sister who I knew, I tried to get married to her some years back, and she admitted that she was sexually abused by her own father from the time she was 2 to the time she was 7. And she was born Muslim, from a Muslim family, from India. She had at least 5 generations of Islam on both sides of her family. Sexually abused by her biological Muslim father from the time she was 2 to the time she was 7. And these are things that we continuously refuse to recognize and accept as realities. And this is why our communities are still psycho-emotionally broken. This is why our communities are spiritually broken. Because, again, going back to what I mentioned about the 3 dimensions of the human universe, is that all 3 of these things have to function positively and in sync. If one is off, all of them are off. Because in spite of the fact that all 3 of them are respectively different, you can't separate one from the other. They all must at all times function interchangeably and intersectionally. If one is off key, the other ones are going to be off key. If your physical anatomical health is poor, it's going to have an effect on your psyche. It's going to have an effect on your soul. How you communicate with Allah, how you commune with Allah is going to have an effect. If you have an issue in how you commune with Allah, it's going to affect your outlook on the world. It's going to affect your health. If you are emotionally broken, it's going to affect how you commune with Allah and how you commune with creation. It's going to affect your eating habits. All of these things are interconnected. And it's no accident that heart disease is the #1 killer of women in the United States. Because there's too many men breaking the hearts of women. People don't see the correlation between psycho-emotional damage and something like heart disease. It's no accident. These are things that we have to always recognize and accept as realities. And the further we draw ourselves from reality, the less we're going to be able to actually help people. So it starts with things like this, where we have to allow ourselves to be permeable. We have to allow ourselves to recognize the fact that when you're out of your depth, refer people to those who are in their depth. Just like our brother Shadeed, he mentioned, if you know that you're not able to function in a certain space, don't try to function in that space. You're going to do more harm than good. Just like the Prophet said, there is no self-harm, there's no interpersonal harm, and there's no interpersonal harm. You don't harm yourself, you don't harm others. When you have the audacity to function in a space or a realm where you know you don't belong, you're not only oppressing yourself, you're oppressing others. And we have to get out of the business of oppressing ourselves and oppressing others. Because when we operate from a space and place of ignorance or unintelligence or incapacity pertaining to a realm, we oppress ourselves because we're guilty in front of Allah for operating from a space and place where we don't belong. And we ill-advise other people. Just like when Allah says, وَتَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْبِرِّ وَالتَّقْوَى وَلَا تَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْإِثْمِ وَالْعُدْوَانِ. Empower one another via goodness and piety, and do not encourage one another via sin and animosity. We have no idea. We think that we're doing ta'awun with the good, but in actuality, we're doing the ta'awun with the negative. We think that we're giving grand advice to people, but we end up damaging their lives. Just like the brother mentioned about marital advice, right? You can't possibly think that your limited life experience is enough to counsel someone who was probably Muslim since before you were born or before you became Muslim, or before you thought you knew as much Arabic or Islamic science that you thought you did. There's a whole history with those people. And even in terms of people outside of our communities, we have to raise up people within our ranks, within our communities, who know us. And by us, I mean know us. Who knows what it feels like to live with this. To live with this. Right? We have to hone those skills, and we have to pass them on to generations of people who know how it feels to be stopped at any point by a police officer. You know, in the news, this whole thing about Islamophobia, things like this, it has a certain psycho-emotional dimension. But for us as Muslims, we have 3 strikes already. We Muslim, we black. The other people, they just got 1 strike. They Muslim. We got 3. Muslim, black. Right? So, me, I'm not worried about Trumpism. I'm not worried about TSA. I'm not worried about none of that. Because I know for a fact that the only reason why I've never been stopped at an airport is because I have an English first and last name. Because when TSA look at me, they look at me like I'm the Black Bin Laden. But when they see my passport, English everywhere, pass through no problem. I gotta worry about DC police that's outside. I gotta worry about Baltimore police, NYC police. It's more probable that I'll get killed by a member of law enforcement as opposed to a Trump supporter. It's more probable that I'll get killed by a gang member who looks just like me, who grew up where I grew up, as opposed to a member of ISIS. These are the things that we have to worry about. These are the things that I have to be concerned about, that our children have to be concerned about. We don't have to get worried about being deported. ISIS never come into our doorstep. It's not going to happen. Border Patrol is not going to be like, oh, well, you don't have your paperwork right. I've been here. Like, it's not going to happen, you know? So we have to be very conscious and very deliberate as per our audience, and even our non-audience. Because we have to address our non-audience with the same compassion as our audience. And I encourage any and all imams to study chaplaincy, because these are things that are going to be very useful, and they're always going to be useful in our professional arsenals. But we have to be willing, we have to be humble enough to recognize that I'm out of my depth. When you're not humble enough to recognize that you're not out of your depth, it's just going to be business as usual. And when business as usual happens in our communities, we know what happens. Nothing happens. And we make excuses after excuses after excuses. Excuses are like egos. Everyone has them. And you know what an excuse is? An excuse is an excuse to not get work done. And Muslim African Americans, as per our African American experience, we're really good at producing excuses, but we're really bad at producing results. You know, even in terms of how we convey things, we're very good at this, but we're not good at this. We're very poor at putting our resources and our money where our mouth is. And everything isn't about money necessarily. Just to give someone your audience, just to give someone your space, your time, just the fact that you let someone know that you care, whether they live or die, whether they're in a proper space and place, that means the world to people. Like, I was at ICTA convention, right? And this brother, he was literally... That's a side conversation. We'll get to that later. So, I'm at ICTA convention, right? And I'm a very sociable person. I'm a very outgoing person. I'm not necessarily an extrovert, but I'm more like an ambivert. Like, I can function well like in an introverted space and an extroverted space. I kind of like mix between the two. But I'm very sociable. I like to make myself permeable. So this brother, he admitted to me, he was like, yo, I was following you around the convention center. I asked him why. He said, because every time I saw you, you were giving salams to people. Every time I saw you, you had a smile on your face. And he said, that had a profound effect on me because he's obviously not used to, he's from the Bronx, he's from the BX, he's from New York. Even among us as Muslims, right? Sadly, we've become an ummah that doesn't smile. And one of the things that Muhammad, peace on him, said, even giving a smile is charity. And he said, give charity. He said, charity extinguishes sins just like water extinguishes fire. So why would we not want our sins extinguished just by smiling? And not one of them fake selfie smiles. Something authentic. Something that's real, you know? And when the brother said this to me, it reminded me that people really observe your actions, whether you want to recognize it or not. And your best promotion is your character and your behavior. And this is why the Prophet said, I've only been sent to correct khuluq, character. And this is why Allah describes him as khuluqan adim, right? The most supreme character. And this is why the Prophet mentioned, whenever he looked in the mirror, he would say, Allahumma kama ahsanta khalqi fahsin khuluqi. Just as you perfected my anatomy, perfect my character. We say that dua all the time, but we don't embody what that really means, right? It means that, mashallah, we're all good-looking people, mashallah. But that good-lookingness is going to be internal and external, right? It's no point for you to be good enough to be on Vogue magazine, but yet your heart is dark. We're running out of time. So, again, the point is to be permeable, to be authentic, to be real, to show people that you care. We have a lot of apathy in our world, and we need more empathy. And I exist. One of the things that I know that Allah has placed me in the mundane to do is to spread empathy. And one of the best ways that I've been able to spread empathy is through chaplaincy and various other things that Allah has given me as an arsenal to do. And I'm grateful to Allah that He has given me platforms to spread empathy, and I just hope that whatever benefit that I have given, that it's accepted and that's internalized, and that we go forward. But it doesn't stop here. As I said, we need more people in the field of chaplaincy. We need more people in the field of counseling. We need more people who know the difference between at-tajneen, jinn possession, jinn influence, and mental illness. We need more people who are skilled in both disciplines. Because when you're skilled in both disciplines, it's only going to help our community. But if you're only skilled in one, it makes you pathologically limited. So, and even myself, I'm actually in the steps now of actually learning ulum al-ruqya so that I can be even more equipped to deal with people who actually legitimately suffer from at-tajneen, because I recognize and accept the reality that as I go forward, this is something that I need to know. I need to have the sciences of jinn extraction or jinn influence, jinn possession. I need the knowledge of that science under my belt to be more holistically able to convey healing for people. And just even people who are raqab, even people who are expert in ruqya, they need the knowledge of mental illness so that it better equips them to be able to holistically be able to heal people. So with that being said, I'll end there. You can reach out to me on my social media platforms. Our brother Shadeed, he's connected to me, so if you have any, if you want to connect with me, you can. And again, may Allah guide my speech and guide my intentions, my motives, and may Allah make the little that I've said beneficial. And may Allah allow me to learn from you as you've learned from me. Wa sallallahu wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
So, if anyone has, we have a few minutes for some questions. Anyone have any questions for Brother Gareth? now would be the time, inshallah. If you guys have any questions, I have one.
Sure.
How important is it for an imam or board administrators of Masjid to be aware of mental health issues in the Islamic community? Is that something that an imam should know, something that board members should know? And
it's a fariḍah. It's an Islamic mandate. Just like when the Prophet said, "Talib al-ilm fariḍatan ala kulli muslim," right? The pursuit of knowledge is an obligation upon every Muslim, right? And obviously we know ilm al-nafi', right? This is ilm al-nafi'. This is beneficial knowledge. So, like I mentioned earlier, for the a'imma, for the tulab, for the du'at, for the ulama, for the imams, for the students, for the propagators, for the scholars, for our teachers, it is a fariḍah. It is an Islamic mandate that they are well versed in mental health issues. It's a fariḍah. And if they do not compel themselves to do this, this is a dhulm. It's an oppression. Because you are oppressing yourself by not being equipped to convey how to deal with this to others, and the people suffer because we're not equipped. So period. It's something mafruḍ. It's something Islamic mandatory. Period. It's a fariḍah.
And are there people in Masjid, because we tend to think that this is a non-Muslim thing? Right?
Kufa knowledge.
Right. No. I'm talking about just having people with mental health illnesses. We tend to push that off because a lot of people don't get help for it because they tend to think that it is indicative of their lack of religiosity or their lack of spirituality. Can a person be spiritually inclined and still have mental illnesses? Does one have anything to do with the other?
Yes and no. Like, for example, the narration of Tufail ibn Amr al-Dawsi, his companion, his fellow tribesman who attempted suicide. He wasn't a fasiq. He wasn't known to be a fasiq. He was known to be a salih. But he was slipping. The shaitan caught him slipping. And the shaitan exploited that. Right. So in no way does it mean that if you are mentally disturbed or psycho-emotionally traumatized, that in no way means that you are less than or less of a Muslim. And it's a reason why Imam Muslim put that in his Musnad under Kitab al-Iman. There's a reason why he put that narration under the chapter of faith.
Good point.
There's a reason for that. And it shows us that this did not put an imprint or a dent in that person's faith. It just mentioned something that was psycho-emotionally relevant that was not addressed. And as a result of it not being addressed, sure, it had an effect on his faith, but it didn't define his faith. See, our trauma in life doesn't define our connection to Allah. It can taint it, it can influence it, but it can't define it. The only thing that can define our relationship with Allah is our adherence or lack thereof to at-tanzeel, revelation. As long as we allow our connection to Allah to be defined by at-tanzeel, by revelation, then nothing else can dent our faith, because we have a premise, we have an asl, we have a foundation that is thabit, that is firm. That doesn't mean that we're going to drive off course sometimes. That doesn't mean that we're not going to violate the speed limit sometimes, because sometimes we all get tickets, right? But the point is that you stay on your side of the road. So Tawheed is the road that we're supposed to stay on. At-tanzeel is the road that we're supposed to stay on. That defines our destination. So at-tanzeel is our Google Maps. It tells us everywhere to go. So as long as we use revelation as our Google Maps, we're going to be okay. Sometimes we might take a detour that we shouldn't have taken. Sometimes we would have merged in unnecessary thick traffic. And that's just life. You know, sometimes we see the punishment. We see a cop. We're like, we just blow past on purpose, and the cop stops us. Woo, 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 woo. But that's life. But that doesn't define our journey. Our journey is exclusively defined by revelation. As long as we use revelation to define our connection to Allah, with Allah's help, we're going to be good. Like you mentioned, the problem is that we try to impose the natural issues of the dunya, of the mundane, to try to define our faith. Our fitan, our test, can never define our faith unless we let it. And if we let it, that's our personal weakness. And all of us have personal weaknesses. But just to make a long story short, is that they influence one another, but they don't define one another. Our tests don't define our faith. Our faith definitely can define our tests, because if we use our faith to navigate through our tests, then that shows that we're doing something right.
Absolutely.
But if we allow our test to navigate our connection to Allah, we know we're doing something wrong. You know what I'm saying? So,
anyone else have any questions?
yes.
Yeah, I just have a question. How does, like, I know you don't understand this all now, but, like, how would you be able to determine the difference between someone who will diagnose somebody with or
Right.
possession?
Right. Well, again, as per my profession, I don't diagnose. I assess. So a psychologist is someone who would diagnose. A psychiatrist is someone who would diagnose. But just in terms of what I know pertaining to attention and mental illness, again, even if you're a professional in one or the other or both, it's almost impossible to tell the difference. You would have to actually explore both venues to see which one is which. The problem is that we don't. The problem is that we're pathologically tunnel vision based on either our knowledge or lack of knowledge, information or lack of information. It's just sheer ego and arrogance. We think that we know so much about a subject that we purposely make ourselves blindsided to the other side of the moon, if that makes sense. Some of us are so focused on secular discipline that we purposely deny the fact that there is an Islamic element to it, and then vice versa. We're just so stuck on a religio-spiritual paradigm that we deny the reality of the validity of a secular dimension, right? And in really all reality, I don't even like calling it secular, because all true beneficial knowledge is good because it comes from Allah anyway. You know what I'm saying? So any type of knowledge that's inherently positive that can help get us closer to Allah, realistically, that's Islamic knowledge anyway. So my profession is Islamic by definition because it helps me get closer to Allah, and it helps me to convey empowerment to others to get them closer to Allah. Because my role as a chaplain is not to fix people. My role as a chaplain is to empower people. My role as a chaplain is to give people tarbiyah. And we know there's a difference between a ta'lim and a tarbiyah. A ta'lim is just you running your mouth, spitting facts and information at people. And it's like a hit or miss. But with a tarbiyah, you literally make yourself self-invested in a person's growth and development. And this is why Allah is Rabbul Alameen. This is why Allah is the Lord of the universe. Because He's always self-invested in His creation. At all times. It's just that we don't respect and appreciate that. But Allah is always self-invested in His creation. I mean, obviously, we're not trying to be like Allah. Obviously, we get the point. Is that Allah has allowed us to manifest a tarbiyah, which is just a sprinkle of His quality of a tarbiyah. He has given that to us out of His mercy as a way to commune with creation and to be self-invested not only within ourselves, but within creation. But you can't commit yourself to a tarbiyah without empathy, without compassion. So, to just make a long story short, you have to know the fact that you don't know all the time the difference between mental illness and attention, regardless of how expert you are. Because a shaitan has the ability to make us see things that are not there. And this is why we always seek refuge with Allah from a shaitan, from Satan. He has, even if we're reading the Quran, even if we're reading Revelation, if we don't seek refuge with Allah from Satan, he can make us see something in Revelation that's not there, that's not true. It happens all the time. And there are literally people who are led astray when they study Revelation from a corrupted premise. It happens all the time. And it's no accident that all of the Ahzab, all of the sectarian groups were founded by ulama. They were founded by scholars. They weren't founded by some layman that just picked up an Arabic 101 book. These people who were expert at kalam, expert at the Arabic language, expert at nuzul, revelatory text, and they were led astray because of their egos and their desires. So we have to be conscious of that all the time, is that we have to recognize the fact that we are limited. And going back to what I mentioned, the difference between the knowledgeable person and the ignorant person, is that the knowledgeable person is always willing to admit that they don't know everything. Why? Because we know Allah is Al-Alim. We know Allah is the all-knowing, and we are not the all-knowing. So regardless of how much mastery or expertise we have in a subject, we have to recognize the fact that only Allah really knows what's really going on. We only hope that Allah gives us a window, a glimpse into a person's narrative, and to help empower them through listening and understanding That's a good question.
Repeat the question so the people
Okay,
know.
so the brother asked, in terms of neurology, how much of an effect does that have on a person's character?
Like the things that manipulate your neurological function.
Right.
Whether it's chemical or visual.
Right. So as a behavioral scientist, I have to take all of those things into consideration because even in terms of our life prior to birth, within the womb, within the arham of our mothers, and may Allah bless our mothers, ameen. So there's a reason why the womb is called rahim, because rahim is from the Arabic verb rahama, which means to mercify. So there's rahim, there's protection in the womb. So Allah has safeguarded the child within the womb of his mother, right? And even in terms of what we define as ummah, or community, or nation, society, the etymology of ummah is mother. So Allah, out of his mercy, he has put the mother at the centerpiece of society. And childbirth is one of those most important manifestations of the centerpiece of society. So within the arham, within the wombs of our mothers, many things take place. It's a known fact that from the second trimester, a person is able to hear. The very first physical fact from the fu'ad, that from the faculty that Allah has given us for the mundane, the very first one that's enacted, that's turned on, is the sense of hearing, which ironically, that's the last one that's cut off when we leave the mundane, when we're in the grave, because the Prophet mentioned that when you're in the grave, you can hear the footsteps and then it's cut off. So from birth to death, some hearing is the first one and the last one from the fu'ad that are enacted and that's closed off. So with that being said, from behavioral scientific perspective, as soon as you hit the second trimester in the womb of your mother, you're able to hear anything and everything in the outside world. And anything that you hear, it has an effect on how you chemically evolve. Like, for example, you have some people, when they're born, they're prone to anger. That's just their character because of the experiences that their mothers may have gone through. So if you are pregnant and your husband is being a jerk or he's being a tyrant, those chemicals that your body releases, those endorphins that your body releases, it gets implanted into the child. And the child socially inherits the trauma that the mother is experiencing. If the mother is having a very traumatic pregnancy, if her work environment is not good, if she's being abused psycho-emotionally, spiritually, physically, even sexually, if these things happen, they have effects on the child. And all of those chemical, like you mentioned, the neurological development, the evolution, the chemical evolution and development, that takes place in the womb and it has monumental effects on the child. It's a behavioral scientific fact that all of our human experiences from the second trimester to age 10 affects us either directly or indirectly as long as we live.
And now when women are pregnant, science is actually, or the medical field is actually recommending that a lot of pregnant women get the flu shot.
I mean, that's up for debate. There's a lot of things that I wouldn't personally recommend.
Right.
That probably being one of them, because we don't know how that prenatally affects the child. Because again, anything that affects the mother, by definition, is going to affect the child. That's just reality. Whether it's what you eat, what you smell, what you hear, what's said to you, all of those things.
In terms of the neurological manipulation.
It's a valid plausibility. I can't speak on it because I'm not a medical professional, I'm not a neurologist, but just from a behavioral scientific perspective, it takes part. Even in terms of how our intelligence manifests and evolves. There's 9 different types of human intelligence. 9 different types. And these are just the types of intelligence that human beings have been able to discover by Allah's mercy. So some of these types of intelligence, they automatically develop in the womb of the mother, they become active, and then some of them become dormant. And then after birth, sometimes those types of intelligence either stay dormant or they become weak or they become enhanced. Like I'll say, for example, myself, I always sucked at math. And both of my parents were very good at math. And ironically, some of my best teachers were math teachers. And in fact, it was my math teacher that actually bought me a translation of the Quran. He wasn't even Muslim, may Allah guide him. And the translation of the Quran was the very first religious book that I ever read cover to cover. So that's just a sidebar point. So yeah, so to what you mentioned, anything that happens in the prenatal stage, they're going to have monumental effects, whether we recognize it or not, either consciously or subconsciously. From the 3rd trimester until age 10, all of those experiences they affect us humanly, either directly or indirectly, as long as we live.
So, if you guys have any more questions for Gareth, because I can listen to him all day. If you guys have any more questions for him, inshallah, he'll be around for a little bit. But we
Actually,
need
I
to
leave in a little bit, ironically, unfortunately.
So, there you have it. So, please give him a round of applause, inshallah, for what he presented. This is the type of expertise that we need in our communities. This is what we need. This is what we're missing. And part of the reason why we're missing this is because imams and people in positions of authority feel threatened by this. If you are an imam, for example, that was of, very minimal knowledge, right? And you invited someone like Gareth to your masjid, and you weren't comfortable with sharing your platform and allowing other people to have, that light for a moment, you wouldn't invite somebody like this because you would be afraid that at the end of his talk, all of your community are going to get up and follow him and begin to, listen to him. And that is why in many of the African American Muslim communities, professionals such as Gareth, such as Sister Nisa, professionals such as them are not given platforms in our communities out of fear, sheer ego, that these people are going to come in and take my community from me.
That's literally actually happened to me before. I would actually deny that. because
it's a fact.
I'm a quote unquote certified deviant, so that's literally happened to me. That's literally happened to me.
It's a fact. I mean, it's not something that is mustaghrab. It's not something amazing. I mean, when you look at the story of Imam al-Bukhari, the same thing happened to him. Imam al-Bukhari, one of his scholars, Muhammad ibn Yahya al-Dhuhli, he made Imam al-Bukhari what's called a mu'eed. Mu'eed is the person who, once the sheikh is done, he leaves, and the mu'eed, he reiterates the lesson to the students that come late. Okay. I love you, man. Thank you. So the mu'eed is the one who reiterates the lesson after the sheikh is done to the students who came late. So Imam al-Bukhari used to reiterate the entire lesson from his memory. The sheikh is sitting there, he's quoting hadith after hadith, reading from his book, from his manuscript, reading. And Imam al-Bukhari, on one occasion, corrected the sheikh from his memory. He said that hadith is not on the authority of Fulan and Fulan, it's on the authority of Fulan and Fulan. And when he went back and he checked, he realized that Bukhari was right. He's reading from a book, Bukhari is correcting him from his memory. So students started to realize if Bukhari can reiterate the entire lesson from his memory, why should we take from the sheikh instead of taking from him? So what did the students started to do? They started to flock to Imam Bukhari. They would show up late on purpose when the sheikh came, and when he left, they would all flock to Imam Bukhari. The sheikh, he could not handle that. So what did he do? He lied on Imam Bukhari and he said, Imam Bukhari, I don't know why you listen to him or take from him. He says that the Quran is created. Now Bukhari never held that opinion. That was actually the opinion of Imam Muslim. Not the Quran was created, but my speech, my actions are created. There's this whole debate about whether or not your actions are created or not created. Imam Ahmad would have the opinion that you shouldn't say that because it leads you to say that the Quran is created. So basically, if you say my recitation of the Quran is created because of the movement of my tongue and my lips, may have a point, but it also look at what it leads to. So scholars like Imam Ahmad and others were of the opinion that you shouldn't even say that. But Imam Muslim held that position, but he never said anything about Imam Muslim because Imam Muslim wasn't a threat to him. So he lied purposely on Imam Bukhari and said he says that the Quran is created. And what did people begin to do? Slowly but surely walk away from him. So Imam Bukhari, at the end of his life, no one would sit with him and take from him. So do you think I get worried when someone says, oh, I don't take from you, I don't listen to you, I don't take? People didn't take from Imam Bukhari. Who am I? Same thing happened with Shaykh Uthaymeen, rahimahullah ta'ala, in recent times. There was a time when people wouldn't even sit. I remember sitting with a scholar, not to mention his name, but there was a scholar that I used to sit with in Medina. He said, I remember there was a time when there was only me and one of the students sitting with Shaykh Uthaymeen. Who am I to get upset? All out of pure jealousy. So if this could happen to Imam al-Bukhari, so the ego, the jealousy, the fear that this person is going to come into my community and take my community members from me, it's real. It's not a joke. And this is one of the main reasons why many of the professionals in our communities do not have a platform in our Masjid and our Islamic institutions to teach, to educate, to empower. So we have our last presentation, which will just be myself, talking about the new Shahada, new Convert Acclimation Program, the NCAP, NACP, excuse me, the NCAP, New Shahada, New Convert Acclimation Program. And this is something that I think every masjid should have. So since I'm sitting here, I might as well just be comfortable here. So one of the things I know that we're all aware of is that many new converts to Islam, we see this revolving door with a lot of them. They go in and out of Islam. And that's a problem. That's a problem that we are inviting people to the religion, and then they come into Islam and they have such a horrible experience that they decide that they're going to go revert back to whatever their previous belief system was, or they just end up becoming a non-active Muslim, meaning non-practicing Muslim. They still identify with the faith, but they don't necessarily practice. And believe it or not, some of us are contributors to that. We have created such a toxic environment in many of our Islamic centers and communities that we have literally chased people away from Islam. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said that even to some of his companions. He said, "Inna minkum lamunaffirin." He said, from amongst you are those who chase people away. And he said that to some of his companions. Inna minkum lamunaffirin. From amongst you are those who chase people away. In another hadith, he said that I have been sent to, be merciful to the people, not to chase people away. And another hadith, he said, yassiru wa la tu'assiru, bashiru wa la tunaffiru. Make things easy for people, don't make it difficult for them. Give glad tidings to people and don't what? Don't chase them away. Don't chase people away. All right? And unfortunately today, this is what is happening. So I want you to understand something. New converts in the African American Muslim communities, they are a large population of our communities. New converts to Islam. And of course, of the new converts to Islam, women make up the vast majority of the new converts, statistically. I don't know if you guys knew that. Statistically, women make up the vast majority of people who convert to Islam. And more specifically in the African American Muslim experience. And so when we talk about establishing an SOP, accommodations need to be included in that to help new converts acclimate themselves to Islam and to the Islamic community in a healthy way. All right, the Prophet ﷺ did his best to accommodate his companions. It's no secret that all of the Prophet's companions were converts. Right? Was there someone from amongst the Prophet's companions that was born Muslim? I'm not talking about the youth of the Sahaba. Obviously, they were born Muslim. I'm talking about those from his peer group. They were all converts. Islam was new. All right? So now we have to ask ourselves, how did the Prophet ﷺ welcome these people as they were converting to Islam? And then we have to ask ourselves, well, what are we doing in our communities to help, since we're all following the Sunnah, right? I love when people say that, because I'm like, well, what Sunnah are we following? We have selective Sunnah syndrome, SSS. We cherry pick from the Sunnah what we think is easy for us, and we do it. And then we shame everybody else for not doing the portion of the Sunnah that we are doing. Meanwhile, there's a whole section of the Sunnah that we've completely neglected. How did the Prophet ﷺ welcome those who were new converts into Islam? To make their experience one that was holistic, one that was healthy, and one that was empowering for them to become the people that they became. You can tell that the Sahaba's experience with Islam was healthy by the type of people that they became. Even women, they became scholars. I remember we were doing the Mardiya show, and we were talking about this this misnomer about the Prophet ﷺ marrying Aisha at such a young age. And that, the Prophet ﷺ, his reputation, even up until today, people have taken shots at him, his reputation for marrying a woman at such a young age. And even to the point where some people were suggesting that this was, socially unacceptable on any level because, he's a grown man marrying this young woman. And I remember Muhammad Mufti Munir, he responded to that with such a profound response. He said, if the Prophet ﷺ marrying Aisha at such a young age was so psychologically damaging to her, right? How did Aisha become a scholar? Because, as we know, any woman who is psychologically traumatized from an intimate relationship with an older man does not go off to become some great woman, great scholar, great warrior, great community leader, right? That doesn't usually happen. She usually wallows in her self-pity, wallows in whatever emotional trauma that she is going to experience for the rest of her life, and that becomes the end of her narrative, in most cases. So how was this woman? So she wasn't forced into anything. So what I'm saying is that her relationship with the Prophet ﷺ was so healthy that even though he died, and she was only 18 when he died, Aisha later on died at 54, 58? How many more years did she live without a husband? She wasn't distraught. She wasn't emotionally traumatized. She participated in the Battle of Jamal, in the battle between Muawiyah and Ali, in defense of Muawiyah, in defense of Ali. And the Sahaba had said, no, this is the mother of the believers, this is the Prophet's wife. They cut the legs off the camel, carry the camel, carry Aisha back home. You're not coming out here to fight. You're the Prophet's wife. That's why it's called, Ghazwat al-Jamal, the battle of the camel. And I mean, look at the type of relationship that the Prophet ﷺ had with Aisha, to look at the type of person she became. So who people become is pretty much indicative of the healthiness or unhealthiness of the environments in which they were nurtured in, right or wrong. So when we look at our communities and we see Muslims converting to Islam and then leaving Islam, we have to ask, what is wrong with the African American Muslim communities? That this revolving door exists where people are going in and out of Islam. What are we doing wrong? It's not the problem of the new convert. It's obviously the problem of the communities that are creating such a toxic environment for people to decide, I don't want to be a Muslim anymore. At some point, we have to ask ourselves that question. So let me give you some examples so that we have some context to how the Prophet ﷺ welcomed new converts into Islam. And then perhaps from that, we can begin building a program in each and every masjid that would be accommodating to people who convert to Islam. Because what we're doing is not productive at all. And Allah forbid that an African American converts to Islam in a predominantly Arab or a Desi community. They're almost, the invisible man, the invisible woman. They're not even seen. Their needs are never even met. Because people from Arab or Pakistani background, they're not converts. None of them converted to Islam. They were all born and raised Muslims, so they can't possibly understand what someone who comes from our hue, who comes from our environments and converts to Islam, they can't possibly understand the challenges, the layers of challenges that we go through. And Allah forbid that it's a woman who has children and that the layers just, continue to compile. So the Prophet ﷺ, he did his best to accommodate his companions in their journey to finding a home in Islam, socially, emotionally, and spiritually. For example, if a person had a particular status before Islam, the Prophet ﷺ, to accommodate them, would not take that away from them. He would allow them to keep the status that they had by recognizing it and forcing his companions to recognize it. Not what we do today, person converts to Islam and they could be the mayor of whatever city. And it's just like, yeah, but you're going to sit on the musalla, you're going to sit and listen to the imam. You're a regular person like everybody else. We like to level everybody out. The Prophet ﷺ dealt with everybody based upon their status. Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, she said, "Umirna an nunazzil an-nas manazilahum." We have been commanded to put everyone in their proper place, to deal with everyone the way that their situation necessitates. That is what is called hikmah. That's not nepotism. That's not preferential treatment. That is called hikmah, wisdom. Dealing with everybody based upon where they are, socially, financially, socioeconomic statuses, whatever. The Prophet ﷺ sent a letter to Heraclius, the emperor of the Byzantine Empire, and he addressed him from Muhammad ﷺ to Azim al-Rome, to the emperor of Rome. He acknowledged his status. It doesn't take anything away from him. He acknowledged his status. And so, for example, the reason why you would do this is because when a person converts to Islam, you want them to be an asset to the religion, not a liability. We have a whole bunch of liabilities in our communities simply because we haven't empowered them. Yeah.
How do you reconcile what happens in a lot of African American communities when certain people of certain statuses or, socioeconomic backgrounds or race backgrounds, they do take the shahada, and we do kind of lift them up to a certain status and it proves detrimental to our communities. How do you reconcile?
For example, are you talking about someone like, for example, that's Caucasian? Because we do it with Caucasians. We do it. So be a straight shot. Don't cut your... Nobody's funding this. I don't owe nobody no explanation for what I say. Right? The only one that I am accountable to is my Lord. I don't owe anybody else anything. Yes, we do in the not necessarily in the African American Muslim community, but in a lot of other communities, when a person is Caucasian, converts to Islam, they are given preferential treatment. They are given a certain status just solely on the base of the color of their skin. It does happen. It does. And I don't think that has any. I think that has to do with similar to what Mimi mentioned is this inferiority complex. This feeling that, I need to jump in my rightful place, right? As, Carter G. Woodson said, when you program a man's mind, like to go through a certain door, even when the door is not there, he'll create one. You understand what I'm saying? Like once that inferiority is implanted in that person's mind, you don't have to superimpose that on them or enforce that. They'll self-enforce. They'll do that on their own.
Is it possible to think or to accept that maybe reverts are taught out of order?
Are taught out of order?
Yeah. That's what I'm knowing. We know the process it wasn't conditioned to be a prophet until he was 40.
Right.
So from birth to 40, he had an impeccable character. Before the pillars of Islam were anything. So, in our growth or reversion, I'm talking about us, like me, I'm a first generation Muslim. When I became Muslim, I had no role model to teach me or show me this Islamic character. Nobody showed me the sunnah from that perspective. Many times, when people revert to Islam, we say, when I get pregnant, memorize Quran, take an Arabic class, a character is very rarely, if at all.
I'm going to get to that. I'm going to give examples of how the Prophet ﷺ nurtured new converts, starting from their socioeconomic status to emotional, disturbances they may have had. I'm going to give you an example of a Sahabi who converted to Islam, who was teased by some of the Sahaba because of his previous faith. And what the Prophet ﷺ did to reconcile that. And all of those things factor in. Yes, we are taught incorrectly. How does a person convert to Islam and the first class he or she is taking is an Arabic class? What do they need to know Arabic for? I'm just really perplexed. How in the world does a person convert to Islam? You haven't assessed. Remember, we were talking about the assessment. You haven't assessed where this person is academically, socially, financially. Because believe it or not, if I'm suffering financially, I can't sit in an Arabic class and, absorb everything that you're saying because I got bills. You understand what I'm saying? Like, you sitting me in a class and you haven't even assessed all of the other factors in my life that are important, that are priorities for me. But we're going to stick you in an Arabic class. What does a new convert to Islam need to know Arabic for? You can say, well, they need to pray. All right, so then the focus should be on Al-Fatiha, because that's the only Arabic that is required of them in the Salah, in the mandatory Salah, in the Taslim. Takbir, Allahu Akbar, you enter into the prayer. Taslim, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Enter, exit, and the meat and potatoes, which is Al-Fatiha. That's it. They don't need to know anything else. That is the bare minimum that any Muslim needs in order for their salat to be complete. The Sami Allahu liman hamida, Rabbana wa lakal hamd, Subhana Rabbiyal Azim, Subhana Rabbiyal A'la. What is the place in the salat? For those of you who study salat, you have what are called wajibat, things that are obligatory. You have the mustahabbat, things that are recommended. You have the mustahsinat, you have the things that glorify and that you beautify your prayer. You understand? You have arkan, the first thing I thought. You got the arkan. If you miss any of the rukn, any of the arkan of salat, your salat is batil. And that's ruku', sujood, these are qiyam, mandatory. Rukn. Then you have the wajibat. And then you have the mustahabbat and the mustahsinat. What category does Sami Allahu liman hamida, Rabbana wa lakal hamd, Subhana Rabbiyal Azim, Subhana Rabbiyal A'la? What category does those phrases fall into? And if a person does not say that in their prayer, is their prayer still maqboola? Is it accepted? Yes, it is accepted. It's accepted. So the only thing that is mandatory is Al-Fatiha. Even the recitation of a short surah afterwards, the scholars debate on whether or not that is something that is from the mustahsinat, things that enhance or beautify your prayer, or whether it's something that is recommended. But we definitely know it's not wajib, meaning if you just recited Al-Fatiha and you did not recite a short surah, your salah is still maqboola. At least that's the opinion that I heard. So my point is, educationally, and we're talking, you mentioned about teaching you akhlaq and adab. Those are all of the first things that need to be taught to a person who recently converts to Islam. But we got it backwards. Here again, the miseducation of the Negro, right? Because we don't take time out to assess our needs. We stick them in an Arabic class. We stick them in a class about marriage. And now you got somebody who converted to Islam 2 months ago talking about they're looking for marriage. What you need to be looking for is the only marriage a new shahada should be looking for is a marriage to your Lord. Divorce the dunya and marry your Lord subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's it. You need to detach from everything, and you need to attach yourself to the one that gave you everything. That's the most important connection that a new convert needs. But we're connecting them to everything that is not going to contribute to their ability to be empowered. And we can see it through the revolving doors. So let me just share this with you, and then we'll open it up for a conversation. Because this is by far one of the most damaging things in our communities. We're seeing souls come into the light and then leave out of the light. As Allah describes the hypocrites in Surah Al-Baqarah. That when the lightning strikes, they're there, they're in the light, and as soon as it goes dark again, they retreat. So this is the type of behavior that we're creating in our communities. So when a person converted to Islam and they had a status, the Prophet ﷺ did not take away that status and level them and reduce them to everyone else, because he wants them to be an asset to Islam. When he made dua that Allah guide Amr ibn Hisham, Abu Jahl, or Umar ibn al-Khattab to Islam, he wanted them to be an asset to Islam. He said, "Oh Allah, guide whichever of these two you deem to be beneficial to Islam, to Islam." And Allah chose Umar ibn al-Khattab. So that's saying we want people to convert to Islam and be an asset to Islam, not a liability, constantly pulling and taking from the community, and then when they feel like they haven't gotten what they needed, they leave and go back to Christianity or go back to wherever it was. So an example of this is Abu Sufyan. Abu Sufyan was one of the chiefs, one of the elite from Meccan society. He was not your average person. From the elite of Meccan society. The Prophet ﷺ even strategically married his daughter to help put an end to a lot of the war that was going on between them. If I marry your daughter, you would look foolish trying to kill me now because I'm your son-in-law. Very strategic. The Prophet ﷺ, and that's not to say that that's the only reason he married. He didn't marry her solely for that, but it was a strategic move. When Abu Sufyan converted to Islam, the Prophet ﷺ was on his way to go conquer Mecca. And the person who brought Abu Sufyan to the Prophet ﷺ to convert to Islam, anyone know who did that? Who was responsible for that? Who gave him da'wah? The Prophet's uncle, Abbas. Right? You see how empowered, because Abbas took his shahada just a little bit before Abu Sufyan. And he goes and he gets Abu Sufyan. He's like, "Come on, man, just convert to Islam." Because it was clear that the Prophet ﷺ was going to be victorious. It was clear to anybody who had two eyes. So Abu Sufyan finally comes, he takes his shahada. And Ibn Abbas turned to the Prophet ﷺ and he said, "O Messenger of Allah, اجعل له شيء فإن أبا سفيان رجل يحب الفخر." He said, give Abu Sufyan a status. Give him something because he's a man that loves praise. Give him something. And the Prophet ﷺ said, "Okay, whoever enters into the house of Abu Sufyan, when we enter into Mecca, whoever goes into the house of Abu Sufyan, فَهُوَ آمَن, he's safe." Abu Sufyan feels empowered because now he's running. Anybody who comes into my house, he good. Come into my house. Right? He gave him something. Right? This is a new convert. Wanted to give him a status, something that would make him feel like he didn't lose anything for converting to Islam. Think about how many people who convert to Islam and feel like they've lost their entire lives. They've traded their entire life and life experiences to now become a Muslim. I got to give up my friends. I even got to give up my mama. Right? Because we're told that your family are kuffar, and somehow, some way, because they are non-Muslims, you are no longer. And then we've reinforced that with Islamic terminologies like al-wala wal-bara. Come on. But that's the grooming process, because that's how we get you on the island by yourself. In the Islamic community, we're literally grooming new converts to be on an island by themselves. Psychological trauma. You can't even converse with your mother, a woman that gave you birth, because you said he's telling her to her face she's a non-Muslim and she's going to hell if she don't take her shahada. The Prophet ﷺ never communicated with any of his family like that. And all of his family were converts. All of the ones who converted to Islam. They weren't born Muslim. Down from his daughter all the way up to his wife to his uncles. They all converted to Islam. Ruqayya, Kulthum, Zainab, they were all adults when the Prophet received revelation. Mind you, he married Khadija when he was 25. He received revelation when he was 40. So that means they were teenagers when he received revelation from Jibreel. And they had to believe in him just like everybody else had. They didn't by default, because they're the Prophet's daughters, they automatically know. As a matter of fact, Kulthum, Zainab and Ruqayya were all married. Kulthum and Ruqayya were married to the two sons of Abu Jahl, who told his sons to disgrace the Prophet by divorcing both of his daughters. Which is why Uthman was given the nickname what? Dhu Nurayn, because he married both of them. My man. Not at the same time, obviously. He married one. And then when she died, he married the other, and the Prophet ﷺ said, "Wallahi, if I had another daughter, I would marry her to Uthman." You understand? That's what that was. But look at the type of experience. Look at how he introduced Islam. But he gave Abu Sufyan something. What are we giving new converts today when they come to Islam? Headache, heartache, emotional, psychological trauma. I'll give you another example. There was a man by the name of Jarir ibn Abdullah. Jarir ibn Abdullah, he converted to Islam, al-Bajali. He converted to Islam. And he came to the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet ﷺ said, Ya Jarir, li ayyi shay'in jit. He said, Jarir, why are you here? What do you need from me? And Jarir, he said, Jittu li aslam. He said, I came to you to take my shahada. I came to you. Watch this interaction. He said, I came to you to take my shahada. Li aslam ala yadik. I want to take my shahada at your hands. The Prophet ﷺ said, A'atini kisa'ak. Give me your cloak. During that time, they used to wear cloaks. You cut out the middle, put it over your head, right? Like a poncho, what we wear today. That was part of their dress, all right? It was part of Arab dress. And maybe I should be careful saying that because now you're going to have people running around with ponchos on. That's not the goal. That's not the goal. You understand? That's not the goal to change our dress. I want to be like the Prophet ﷺ. That's not the goal. Take from his example. The Prophet ﷺ told Jarir, give me, a'atini kisa'ak. Give me your cloak. Watch what the Prophet did to him. ثم أقبل على أصحابه فقال إذا أتاكم كريم القوم فأكرموه. SubhanAllah. Jarir ibn Abdullah, he came to the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet said, what do you want from me? He said, I want to take my shahada at your hands. The Prophet ﷺ said, take off your cloak, give it to me. He went over to his companions and he held up the cloak and he said, when the most noble and honorable of people come to you looking for honor, you honor them. Took the cloak for himself. I'm going to wear your cloak. When the most honorable of people come to you, فَإِذَا جَاءَكَ أَكْرَمُ الْقَوْمِ فَأَكْرِمُوهُ. When the most noble and honorable of the people come to you, then you honor them. How did the Prophet ﷺ know? My question. How did the Prophet know that this was an honorable man? Did he have some knowledge about him before he became? Obviously he did. Do we take the time out to learn who people are before they convert to Islam? Absolutely not. We don't know where they come from. We automatically assume that if you're here in this masjid, you're taking shahada in this masjid, you ghetto, you messed up, dysfunctional, just like we are. And you got to accept the status quo that has now defined our communities. Everybody don't come from that. So if you're educated, then you're shamed for being educated. Who are you to be educated? We ignorant here. Facts. Who are you to be educated? You come in here with your degrees and sounding, talking all proper, talking like white people, right? That's how ignorant we are. You talking like a white person. What does that even mean? But this is what we do. We level you. You're going to get the same treatment that we give to everybody. We don't care where you come from. Meanwhile, you were raised in the suburbs. Your parents were educated. You were educated. We don't care about none of that. We're going to give you the same ignorant treatment that we give to everybody. Am I lying? Am I exaggerating? Is this not how it goes? Please tell me I am not losing my scruples here. Because this is exactly how it goes. We don't care what walk of life you came from, what your background was. We don't care who your parents were, how you were raised. You converted to Islam in this masjid, in this community, so you are just as ignorant as we are. We don't see any differences here. No line. All the lines are blurred. We're all one. The Prophet ﷺ took this man's cloak and put it on himself. Honorable. So I'm going to treat you with honor and dignity. All right? And I mean, how do you think that made him feel? Converting to Islam. My first experience in Islam was someone, the leader of the Muslims, honoring me. After that point, did he become a liability to the community, or was he an asset? Absolutely. Because he felt empowered by the person who was the leader of the Muslim community. You know, so not only that, what else did the Prophet, I want to see if you guys can catch this. I always love to pick your brains. What else happened as a result of this? Yeah. What else happened after this? What else could have happened as a result of what the Prophet did? I'm sure it did happen because Jarir ibn Abdullah al-Bajali, he became a very prominent companion. Thank you. The Prophet set a precedent in the community that if I honored him like that, you have to honor him like that. That's what I'm talking about. Because the leader of the community sets the precedent. So if I honored him like that, then that means that you're going to treat him accordingly. So when people convert to Islam, it's very important that the leadership honor that person and set a precedent in the community for that person to be honored in that fashion. But we set a precedent because no one can be better than the Imam. No one can be, more knowledgeable and honorable than the Imam. So we say, alhamdulillah, make dua for this brother. He converted to Islam. Alhamdulillah, can someone take him and go make wudu with him, right? Rather than the Imam taking him and going make wudu with him. Telling him that by him converting to Islam, we hope that, that you are an asset to our community. You're setting the precedent so that the rest of the community respects and honors that person. The converts that convert to Islam, they are nothing in our communities. Allah forbid they convert to Islam in a, Arab or Pakistani community, right? And he's an African American, he gets no honor. He's just another nigger who converted to Islam. Put a few dollars in your pocket, thank you brother, give you a Quran, and off you go. Come back the next day, any classes here, anything? No brother, we don't have any classes here, sorry. Maybe you can go down to the black Masjid down there, and that's where they teach classes. That's what happened. I'm telling you, facts. There was a sister in Atlantic City who went to, I'm not going to scream on the masjid, but there was a sister in Atlantic City who went to a particular masjid who was, not an African American masjid, and asking for sadaqah. The brother on the board said, we don't have sadaqah here, took her and dropped her off at the African American masjid in Pleasantville. Maybe, your people can help you. Maybe the brothers can help you. We don't have nothing here for you. I mean, the lines are clear. If you don't see it, I'm sorry. The lines are clear to me. And I mean, before I arrived at this point, I literally racked my brain just trying to make sure that, I don't want to do a Malcolm. I want to make sure that when I go out there, that I done crossed all of my T's, dotted all my I's, and I see it for what it is. There's a clear distinction between black Islamic experience and other. Very clear. Very clear. And the only thing that I want us to do is just embrace that. I don't have a problem with that. It just makes me now take more responsibility for the communities that I frequent. The people that look like me. It just now makes me more responsible because I'm aware of it now. I don't take an issue. I don't see it as racism. It's just you take care of your own and we take care of our own. I mean, we can get into the technicalities of it or whether it's racism or not, but that's neither here nor there. If we label it as racism or not, it doesn't change the fact that they take care of their own and we are responsible for taking care of our own. Yes. So she said, what is the threat? What is the fear that the other communities have of the African American Muslim experience? What is it about us that they completely disassociate and separate themselves from? What is it? And Abdul Jalil said it's a microcosm of a microcosm. Seeing the strength of our unity. Mm.
Yes, that I understand that. I think it's more them. It's a hierarchy here in America. This is sustainable living, and this is part of the system of America is to have a hierarchy. Blacks have to be at the bottom. So what they do, they empower other communities, brown people, to come here. They are more empowered than blacks. They have to keep the black at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not something that that's they don't have knowledge of. They have knowledge of. Other communities have knowledge of. Not just on the heritage, but also the different immigrant groups that come in. They have knowledge of it. They have knowledge that they can go to certain communities, they can get certain stipends, they can get certain things, and go to buy houses where we can't do that. You know, there's a certain policy where we can do it, but it's a high interest. We don't get it. See what I'm saying? They will. A lot of them will. And to keep that status quo, you have to keep us down. And they know that. And they do it.
Okay.
Keep us down.
I mean that is a discussion that's a whole other discussion, because I don't even think that African American Muslims are even aware, are even woke enough to actually see what's going on. ICNA right around the corner is having an event right now, right? A 3-day event that they started on Friday all the way up until today. 20-something speakers within the 3-day period, and maybe 2 African Americans. One of whom, Boona Muhammad, who's the entertainment. With all due respect to Brother Boona, I'm not saying that in any disrespectful way. He may be thinking that he's empowering through his poetry, but for them, they look at it as pure entertainment. They don't come from where he comes from to be able to value his words the way that we would value. It would be entertainment for us as well, but it would also be empowering because we could relate. We understand Boona's story. We understand where he comes from, and we have similar experiences. So it resonates with us a lot differently than someone who was raised with a silver spoon in their mouth, who looking at you as, the black entertainment. Right, laugh with you, not at you, The second thing is that, the other speakers, not necessarily on the same level as the other speaker, their main, speakers. And I mean, the thing about it is that, okay, you got a few token Negroes that you added to your roster after some backlash as a result of not having any African American speakers. And the fact of the matter is, I've posed the question before, if you have a 3-day event with all of these African American Muslim scholars on various levels, why are they not a part of that? That's my question. Either because we are ignorant and we don't have adequate knowledge and we don't qualify, or we do qualify but we represent a certain narrative that doesn't align with their narrative. I'm just looking for answers. You know what I mean? And it's very clear to me. I'm just trying to make it clear to everybody else so they can see it for what it is. It's not the lines have already been drawn. I'm just stating the obvious. I'm a convert to the Islam. This stuff has been going on for years. Yeah, maybe in the past they had Abu Sama. Maybe in the past they had, Abu Muslima. Maybe in the past, okay. Today things are completely different. And if it's not the way that I'm saying that it is, then I stand corrected. Please correct me. I'm waiting for the correction. The last example that I'll give you of how the Prophet ﷺ welcomed, the new converts into Islam. We have to understand that converting to Islam is not a simple process. It's not a simple process. There's a lot of changes that go on in a person's life when they change their faith. There's a lot of backlash from family. I'm a convert. I converted to Islam in 1997. And in 2019, I don't necessarily catch backlash because, my family just, I've always been the way that I am now. And, I don't really catch backlash, but you'll get slick comments every now and then, every little here and there. But at the same token, other people may have it worse. For years, they're Muslim, converted to Islam, and they still, every time they step in grandma's house, there's a debate. Every time they step in their uncle's house, there's a debate. You know what I mean? Like, it's unescapable. You go Think about a Muslim woman who converts to Islam, who you are not covered a certain way going to work, and then you convert to Islam and then you put on a hijab, and now you got to deal with 1,000,001 questions the very next day of why you converted to Islam. You're probably going to end up somebody's second or third wife. Why are you wearing that scarf on your head? You got to deal with all of that. And we should be uber sensitive to what new converts go through, both men and women. But it's not a simple process. Their entire lives are going to change, and we want to empower them so that they face their challenges head on, even socially, as many new converts experience alienation and sometimes prejudice as a result of their ethnicity, and that's without a fact. So let me give you an example, and I'll end with this. When Ikrimah, the son of Abu Jahl, converted to Islam, Abu Jahl's son and his daughter, like with all of the stuff that he did to the Muslims, both his son and his daughter converted to Islam. All right? His daughter converted to Islam, and that was the woman that Ali was going to marry as a second wife, and the Prophet intervened. That was Abu Jahl's daughter. His son converted to Islam, whose name was Ikrimah. When Ikrimah converted to Islam, he noticed that some of the Sahaba were not taking to his conversion lightly. He still had that stigma that he was the son of the enemy of Allah and His Messenger, meaning his father. He has to live vicariously through all of the drama that his father did to the Muslims in the early period. So the Sahaba were calling him Ibnu Aduwillah. You are the son of the enemy of Allah. Can you imagine you done converted to Islam and you thinking that the Muslim community is going to welcome you with open arms, and they're now labeling you based upon something that your father did? You are the son of the enemy of Allah. That is no different than we convert to Islam as an African American, and we're thinking we're going to be embraced by the entire Muslim community, and you're still a nigger. You're still a Negro. You're still the son of black folks. I'm just drawing parallels here. Because we think that we convert to Islam and we're going to be embraced by this entire Islamic brotherhood, this Muslim brotherhood. I'm not talking about the deviant group, the Muslim brotherhood. I'm talking about the Muslims in general, that we're going to be embraced by this brotherhood of Islam. Only to be looked at as you're still a Negro in my eyes. It hasn't changed. Your parents, you're still the son, as one of the Sahaba said to Bilal, you're still the son of a black woman. Right? Abu Darda said to Bilal, you are the son, Ibn Sauda, you're the son of a black woman. And that's how some of us are viewed today. We will never be able to escape that. So Ikrimah went to the Prophet ﷺ and he said, O Messenger of Allah, every time I pass through Medina, your companions call me the son of the enemy of Allah. And the Prophet ﷺ, he called his companions and he gave a lecture. فَحَمِدَ اللَّهُ وَأَثْنَى عَلَيْهِ. He praised Allah as he deserves to be praised. And then he said, أَمَّا بَعْدْ. And the Prophet ﷺ said, أَمَّا بَعْدْ. You know that what's coming out of his mouth next is going to be nothing but revelation. Even though it's not in the Quran, it was inspired by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He said, An-nas ma'adin. He said, people are like metals that come from the ground. Some precious, some not. You have gold, silver, platinum, all of these precious metals that come from the ground. He said, people are just like that. An-nas ma'adin. The people are like precious metals from the ground. خِيَارُهُمْ فِي الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ خِيَارُهُمْ فِي الْإِسْلَامِ إِذَا فَقِهُوا. The best of them in Jahiliyyah will be the best of them in Islam, provided they get an understanding of the religion. What is he saying here? Let me see if you guys can make the connection. Ikrimah complained to him that your companions are calling me the son of the enemy of Allah. The Prophet ﷺ calls his companions. He said, people are like the precious metals of the earth. Some good, some bad. The best of the people in Jahiliyyah are the best in Islam, provided they get an understanding of the religion. What is the Prophet saying here? Okay. You are like right there. You threw the arrow, the target's right here, you hit like right there. Boom. Right outside. You in the inner circle, but you missed the red dot. But you there. She said that perhaps the people who were calling him that are, basically displaying their ignorance from Jahiliyyah. And they are not as good as they could have been because they didn't know better. They didn't learn from the Islamic adab that you shouldn't call a person that. Very close. Very close.
People come from different lanes of Jahiliyyah, but as long as they come and receive the revelation, and that the system of this, they give them a fair shot to receive the revelation.
Give him his fair shot. He's Muslim now. Give him an opportunity to create a new narrative for himself, provided he gets an understanding of the religion. Close. Last one. You right in the court. You dribbling. The basket is right there. All you got to do is shoot. Shoot your shot. Come on. I gave you a hint. Who did the Prophet ﷺ make dua for? Umar and who? Abu Jahl. So if the Prophet ﷺ made dua for Abu Jahl, what does that tell you? Huh? He was a good dude. He was a good guy. If he had just, embraced the Prophet ﷺ's message. But he wasn't, he was still a noble of Meccan society. Hence the fact the Prophet made dua for him. Who was Ikrimah? His son. The best of you in Jahiliyyah will be the best of you in Islam, provided you get an understanding of the religion. How are you calling this man the enemy of the son of the enemy of Allah when I made dua for his father to convert to Islam? Allah saw it to be otherwise. That means that he's an honorable, noble person. Now that he converted to Islam, all he has to do is learn his religion, and his status will remain the same. Doesn't take anything away from him. The Prophet made dua for his father. You guys follow me? You made the connection? So it's important for us to understand the Prophet ﷺ, he didn't take that away from him. And of course the same thing happened with his wife, Safiya, who was a Jewish woman converted to Islam, and the Prophet's wives, co-wives, they making mockery of her because of her Jewish ancestry. So Hafsa says to Safiya one day, you're the daughter of Jews. Your parents were Jewish. You're not Arab, right? It's a horrible thing for a co-wife to say to her co-wife, right? So she says, you're the son of a Jewish family, meaning you're not Arab. So Safiya went to the Prophet ﷺ in tears. You just insulted my whole ancestry. You insulted me, not me, just my father, everywhere. You know what I mean? If people cannot hold on to their ancestry and feel honored by where they come from, what is left of them? I can't convert to Islam as an African American and be, and feel a sense of honor and dignity because of my ancestry. I have to be shamed now that I'm you're too American. What the hell does that mean? I'm too American? What else do I know? What else do I know? Don't come at me with that Americanized Islam. I don't even understand what you're talking about. If I can't maintain ties with my ancestry and where I come from, you want me to sever that. That's what Hafsa was doing, shaming her for her ancestry. You're the daughter of a Jewish man and a Jewish woman. So Safiya goes to the Prophet ﷺ in tears, mortified. The Prophet ﷺ took both of his thumbs and he wiped away her tears. And he said, you are the daughter of a prophet. You are the niece of a prophet. Musa and Harun. You are the daughter of a prophet. You are the niece of a prophet. And you're married to a prophet. Checkmate. What does anybody have over you that they can brag about? Nobody got that. None of their family members come from a lineage of prophets. You do. What did he do? He empowered her. Breathed life back into her. So when people say, oh, here goes Shadeed Muhammad on his nationalistic stuff, man, listen, you will never sever me from where I come from. Ever. You will never sever me from my ancestry. That is where I built my identity from. And if you take that away from me, what's left for me? I'm bouncing from wearing thobes to Pakistani outfits to the African Nigerian outfits, trying to find out who the hell I am. And if I don't know who I am, how in the world I'm going to raise a family? How in the world I'm going to raise a ummah if I don't know who I am? How? How does that happen? How does a person with no identity know where he's going? You don't even know where you come from. Fadl Sheikh. Not at all. Because what she said, the expectation is that you are always supposed to be at the bottom. So even Spanish people now have been given a status in Islam that African Americans haven't been given. I sat on a podium with a brother who said to me on the Maradiya show, I am Hispanic Muslim. No one will ever take that away from me. They wave their flag, their culture. They never denounce not an iota of where they come from. Meanwhile, you and me, you and I, African Americans, we gotta, adopt somebody else's, cultural identity and leave our own. Like, nah, man, enough is enough. I've given you hadith after hadith after hadith. And someone will still listen to that and say, oh, that's nationalistic. Do yourself a favor. It is better to remain silent and let people think you're stupid than to open your mouth and remove all doubt.
I think the answer to that is pretty much how you answered it, but we don't just do it within having this self-identity problem. We don't just have it within the stuff. We have it, as my mom has it too.
Yes.
We're African American. We're always trying to be like somebody else.
Absolutely.
Other people's clothes, appreciate other people's cultures and traditions. But when it comes to us, we'll just use something simple. Everybody has some food from the country that everybody likes.
Right.
Go to the Arab world, people laugh and enjoy it, not laughing out of mockery about Arabs liking rice and chicken. You got the Chinese man who loves to eat with his chopsticks, and people are laughing out of enjoyment, not out of mockery. Black people, when it comes to us though, if someone says fried chicken and Kool-Aid or fried chicken and watermelon, people will laugh at it. Okay, people are laughing at the fact that it's something degrading. And we as African Americans feel that it's degrading. I have one brother, he told me his mom. They lived up to the exact word, but they had some white people that stay across the street. So anytime we went to eat watermelon, his mother would make me go in the back room, to the corner, and make me eat watermelon away from the windows. So white people would see me eat watermelon, And so, just even if that stereotype was true, and what's the problem with us accepting it? Like, if a white person did come to me, or anyone else comes to me and says, oh, you black people eat watermelon and fried chicken. So what, man? What's the problem? Why can't we as African Americans?
Why do we take offense to that? Right.
Why can the Chinese man eat with his sticks? You talk about him doing his kung fu, and he's cool with it, you're fine with it, no problem. Why you gotta make it sound so creative that I do fried chicken watermelon? So I'm like,
So what are we going to bring for iftar today? Fried chicken?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah.
watermelon.
Why not? Why not?
Like I was one time me and my wife went somewhere and we were my wife had cooked something, I forget about her, I think it was barbecue or something like that. And one of the women they said to her, oh, so do you like eat this every day? And my wife just sorry. It's like, you don't eat this every day? Like I don't know, you like barbecue and like you like Kool-Aid and stuff like that. I'm sorry we didn't bring any of that to the gathering. And my wife was like, I like drinking Kool-Aid once in my life. But even if I did, so what?
Right? Why is that seen as an insult?
Yeah, but we have, back to the point of what I was trying to make is we as African Americans have this problem of self-identity even when outside of Islam. So that's just a problem that we always have, still have, even probably during the times of
Yes, brother. Oh, good.
I was late, but I like what I've been hearing from others myself. But when we talk about we be Americanized, I think that we must realize that we can't be Americanized, especially with us. I say Africans or indigenous people here in America. With us, we learn the deen more so than them being born in the deen and don't learn it. You know, they may practice it, but not the knowledge of learning. And they got scholars, we got scholars too. But when not as a scholar, we still get books to learn the deen, which they don't. I'm talking about people you was talking about and any other ethnic group that been born in the Islamic country. They be born in a Muslim country and environment, but they don't learn the deen. Only the high echelons, become scholars and all that.
Some.
Yeah,
We don't want to generalize.
But
Some
with
of them.
us,
Some of them.
not the non-scholars or whatever, we always trying to find out what the 40 hadith is, what Sahih.
Not all of us.
Not all of us. I ain't saying all of us.
So, I mean, so
But
on
we
both
learn the
ends.
deen. And I'm saying that we can't Americanize the deen for them or us, because it's separate.
So, what I'm proposing for an SOP for new converts is that number one, that every masjid needs to include in their budget monies that are set aside for those who are new converts. That has to be included in the budget. The masjid has to have a budget. Masjid cannot function with collecting money, putting it into a bank, and then using that. It's you know how we know that we have to have a budget, we have to have things set to the side? Zakat. Because your zakat is taken from what? Your surplus. Which means that is